there's a new phenomenon called distended gut. It's been blamed on numerous factors like insulin, HGH, and even theories like immaculate conception. But however it happens, it's definitely become so out of control that it threatens to destroy whatever's left of bodybuilding as a sport. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at the worst examples of people with distended guts. Scott Steiner. Now I know what you're thinking. Scott Steiner isn't a bodybuilder, he's a wrestler. However, considering he appears in many bodybuilding videos, articles, and was once known as one of the most built men on the planet, he seemed like a good fit for this list. On top of that, he actually has something more than just pure bubble gut that is going on. He also has a gigantic separation in the middle of his chest that's becoming more and more apparent as he ages. It's been discussed online, and people can't seem to figure out exactly what's going on with his entire torso, but it's apparent that he's at least aware of it, as he's gotten a gigantic tattoo to cover up the middle of his chest, and often wears something to disguise his bubble gut. Either way, if the sheer amount of premature deaths doesn't scare you off of stuff like anabolic steroids or human growth hormone, then results like Steiner's definitely should. With that out of the way, let's talk about actual bodybuilders. Phil Heath. Phil Heath is the only person on this list under the age of 40. At 37 years old, he's an extremely well-known bodybuilder and the most successful of this century, winning 7 straight Mr. Olympia competitions from 2011 through 2017. However, as he's gotten older, he's definitely developed a case of the bubble guts. It's actually his rise that's really poured gas on the fire of bubble guts in the sport over the last few years. Numerous pictures of the final contestants were labeled as horrible, and even the Mr. Olympia competition was referred to as the Mr. Pregnant show, forcing the legend of all legends in the game of bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to comment on the state of bubble guts in the industry. Arnold stated that perhaps there needs to be a change in how the contests are scored to penalize the lack of aesthetics in the sport. The sport used to be all about the V-shaped body, and now it really only cares about bulk and mass.
Now, I don't know, it's like kind of like a bottle-shaped body or something like that.
While Arnold admits that even he had to suck in his stomach from time to time, things have definitely gotten out of control, and this most recent Mr. Olympia is a testament to that fact. Jean-Pierre Fuks. Outside of the hilarious last name, Jean-Pierre Fuks is mostly known for a terrible accident that occurred during a weightlifting session and almost ended his career. He was attempting to squat almost 700 pounds at Gold's Gym in Fullerton, California. Initially lifting the amount during a photo shoot for Flex magazine, he suddenly collapsed with the full weight on his back. He describes the accident as follows. "We'd worked up to 7 plates on each side. That weight is not a problem for me. I had done the same thing a week earlier for my training video. I began to squat down and everything was fine. Then in a split second, I went from complete comfort to collapse. My knees just went. I crashed down so quickly the spotters didn't have time to react. Afterward, they felt bad about it. But it was so quick nobody could have caught the weight. Luckily, he was prepared for such an accident and knew that if he wanted to save the tendons in his knees, he should keep his legs straight. So, once the weight was removed, he straightened his legs, and that most likely saved his tendons. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital and was wheelchair-bound for a long time, which is perhaps the source of his bubble gut. His injury is so well known because he urged both Flex magazine and the photographer who took the pictures to actually publish them, to help people know what to do when they're injured. Which is super cool and makes you hope that he can now conquer his biggest test of all, the bubble gut. Kai Green. Phil Heath's most consistent competition has been Kai Green, who has finished second at the 2012, 2013, and 2014 Mr. Olympias behind Heath. He also won the 2016 Arnold Classic, which should at least punish someone like Green for having a bottle shape, as opposed to the classic V shape that Arnold and everyone with eyeballs prefers. Green has a tough background, growing up in the foster care system and residential treatment centers. Because of that, he acted out, and luckily for him, his science teacher noticed that he had behavioral problems and also a genetic gift, so he helped him pursue bodybuilding to take advantage of those gifts while giving him a place to funnel all of his anger and emotion. What's so sad about this current trend is that you hear these amazing stories about how bodybuilding can save a life like Green's, but at the same time, all of that work is essentially going down the drain because it appears that bubble guts are permanent, and there's really nothing that these guys can do, and thus their careers will be over. Now, granted, a lot of them are fairly old, and Green at 42 is at the tail end of his career. But still, you'd hate to see an entire generation of bodybuilders wasted because drugs were taken too far. Ronnie Coleman.
I wasn't bloated. I didn't have to bloated stomach and all that kind of stuff.
If Phil Heath is the most successful bodybuilder of this century, then Ronnie Coleman was the most successful of the 90s. He won 8 Mr. Olympia titles in a row, and also holds the record for the most IFBB professional wins at a staggering 26. Now retired and 59 years old, you can't expect him to be in peak shape. But it is sad to see someone who was as huge as Coleman fall victim to bubble guts himself. This man was a complete beast and made a lot of his competition look small by comparison. This helped offset the obviousness of his protruding stomach. But really, if anyone should be the poster boy for whatever causes Palumboism, it should be Coleman. You'll notice that while Arnold did gain a gut in his later years, it was a natural gut made of fat and sagging tissue, not one that appears to be made of pure muscle. So, something that these guys were either doing in the late 90s or are doing recently is causing this to either manifest years later or their older bodies just can't handle it. There are a ton of theories as to what is causing this problem, as discussed in the intro, and in order to get to the bottom of it before it destroys the sport. More guys like Coleman should come out and discuss it openly. Marcus Rule. At 5'10" and around 310 pounds, even among other bodybuilders, Marcus Rule is considered a huge guy with gigantic arms and legs that many of his peers just don't have. A lot of what bodybuilding, at least used to be, is symmetry and what's aesthetically pleasing. While that's obviously subjective and can change from era to era, a lot of guys don't go for massive bulk, as there are also scores for how lean someone is, how vascular they look, etc. So, while that means he may not win every competition because of his pure bulk, Rule has actually weathered the bubble gut era pretty well despite having one himself. His massive arms and legs help cover up the fact that he does have a distended stomach, which really makes him look a lot more like a Ninja Turtles action figure than something like a He-Man action figure, which one can assume is not what he was going for when he started bodybuilding. King Kamali. King Kamali is a 45-year-old bodybuilder who was born in Tehran, Iran, but now lives in New York City. Sadly, 45 is around the life expectancy of most bodybuilders, thanks to the abuse they do to their bodies, which is extremely ironic, considering bodybuilding is a health-related sport. Nicknamed the Persian Pearl for some reason, and the Terminator, Kamali actually has a Bachelor of Science degree in exercise physiology from George Mason University, meaning he should know better than anyone why he's suffering from bubble gut and what to do to fix it. However, it does seem like a lot of the examples of bubble guts in the sport end up happening to older men as opposed to younger ones, so perhaps it has more to do with age than anything else. Either way, he's clearly past his prime and shouldn't be competing anymore, as there's really no point. And as the sad death of perhaps the most famous bodybuilder, Rich Piana, showed that there has to be a time where you stop abusing your body. And if your gut is literally distended because of the drugs you're using, maybe that's a good sign. Greg Kovat. As just mentioned, 45 seems to be the age that most bodybuilders end up at, a fact driven home by learning about Greg Kovat's life and career. Kovat was a Canadian bodybuilder who passed away in 2013 at the age of 45 due to heart failure. Now, before discussing his career, we should really look at the fact that these men are killing themselves over something that shouldn't be deadly. No one would argue that bodybuilders in the early 70s or before didn't look a lot better than the ones do today, and perhaps that's why the natty movement has really gained a lot of steam lately. But when your sport needs a natural division because of the rampant drug use and oil injection, perhaps it's time for your sport to stop being a sport. especially when most of your icons die of natural causes before their 50th birthday. Either way, Kovat was a beast among beasts. He was actually the largest pro bodybuilder there was in the latter half of the 1990s, at 6.4, and an off-season weight of 330 pounds. His arms measured 25 inches, his chest 70 inches, and his legs a colossal 35 inches. That didn't help hide the bubble gut towards the end of his career, though. Big Lenny. Some people actually believe Palumboism should have been called Lennyism, because the bodybuilder known as Big Lenny definitely rocks the biggest bubble gut of any man, woman, or child in the known world. In fact, he's more stomach than man at this point. And while he's muscular compared to a regular person, he doesn't really seem to be in great shape. It also appears that he doesn't care at all. Like many others on this list, he definitely is past his prime, but considering how he looks now, I'm not sure he ever technically had a prime. Called Big Lenny because of his astonishing height, there is a video of Lenny on YouTube where he discusses his case of bubble guts. In the 21-minute video, he blames too much cardio on the fact that his legs are smaller than his stomach. On that subject, he says that his belly isn't going anywhere, as it's large and hard, and blames it on the fact that he used to weigh 450 pounds. He says that essentially, he'll build the rest of his muscles around his stomach to compensate. And while he does say that he doesn't take any of the stuff people blame bubble guts on, there's no way that a human being gets this large without having taken some sort of performance-enhancing drug. If he was telling the truth, that'd be great, as he calls drug users corner cutters, but it wouldn't be a surprise to find out he's lying about where that gut is coming from. Dave Palumbo. Dave Palumbo will forever be remembered as the man who changed the term distended gut from bubble gut to Palumboism. And the new name has infiltrated the bodybuilding world for sure, as it was brought up to Big Lenny in an interview conducted at the gym about his bubble gut. Like the other members of this list, Palumbo is getting up there in age and is definitely past his prime. Perhaps better than most people on this list, he represents the 90s era of bodybuilding as the gigantic, unnatural, and hypervascular type of builder. He's retired now, but still works in the industry, serving as the editor of Muscular Development magazine and the CEO of RX Muscle, where he sells supplements. I can't imagine that being the namesake for a term as embarrassing as Palumboism is great for his brand, the sales of his supplements or his self-image. A lot of bodybuilders are known to suffer from a form of body dysmorphia called bigorexia, in which they are never happy with their appearance and can never quite get big enough. Perhaps that's why a lot of these guys just destroy their bodies with all sorts of injections and pills. While many have died over the years, the fact that death hasn't stopped them shows just how important being big is to them. Perhaps the silver lining in all of these bubble guts is the fact that it looks terrible, so it may finally be the impetus for change in an industry that is so drug-ridden that it has separate competitions for people that don't take drugs. What do you think? Was this list big enough? Sound off in the comments below. Thanks for watching.